Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Show with myself, Michael Wright. I am joined by a very special guest, Justyn Waterman. Today, we are going to be talking to you about coaching versus mentoring. We're talking about the very essence of support within schools. We're talking about the differences between coaching and mentoring, the different types of different ways that we could be coached and we could be mentored. We're going to talk about good examples, bad examples. We're going to go and hopefully cover everything that we possibly can to help you and your departments and your schools get a better perspective on the differences between the two. So it's going to be an amazing show. I'm really looking forward to this because I've got, let's say, a vested interest in coaching and mentoring. I'm obviously not in Justyn's level and expertise with it all, but I really strongly advocate for good coaching, good mentoring in schools as well. So Justyn, how are you, mate? How's it all going?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, bless you. No, it'll be a really good show. Before we go on, I just wanted to give everyone a heads up, first and foremost, about the Teachers Talk Connect show, which is happening in Manchester. It's on the 14th of March. I've been reliably informed that's about 4 weeks away. 14th of March, the tickets are free. So do come along, do come and talk to myself and other hosts from Teachers Talk Radio. Teachers Talk Radio have also booked in some amazing guest speakers covering a plethora of all subjects to do with education. So please do come along and get your free ticket. If you're interested, head over to ttradio.org/connect 2026, and we'll hope to see you there. And of course, I want to bring another message to our friends at Hatchet Learning. As many of you who listen to TTR Radio, they're a prominent sponsors and good friends of ours in terms of what we do. So we just want to say that this show is brought to you in partnership with Hatchet Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hatchetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. So a breakdown for today's show. We're obviously going to get to know a little bit about Justyn, his expertise in coaching or mentoring. We're going to be delving into the definitions and the differences between coaching or mentoring, and mentoring. We're going to offer some examples, some anecdotes, some good examples, some bad examples. And we're also going to be talking to you about supporting colleagues within the practice of coaching and mentoring. So it's going to be really good for those who want to see this show as a hello everyone, dyslexia. See, this is what happens when you're dyslexic. You're talking and everything's amazing, and then all of a sudden your brain goes, nah, you're just not going to work anymore. So this is what it is. So hi. Anyway, we'll backtrack, shall we, Justyn? Supporting colleagues or organizational practice. We're going to give you some helpful tips and tricks for those. Right. Now we've got that out the way. Justyn, could you tell the audience just a little bit about what you do, perhaps what drew you to this area of coaching and mentoring, please?
Yeah, thank you. I was a teacher for 15 years in primary sector, working in state and private sector of education, and sort of made my way up the ladder into the senior leadership team, and then became this person where I was appraising people actually, and working with people, sort of helping them to find what their next steps were, what their goals were, and that was kind of the school-led sort of idea. And I sort of had an idea in my head that I wasn't particularly liking the way the appraisal system was working. So sort of asked if I could go and sort of explore some other ways of doing this. It was pretty much a way of just had a set of questions that we needed to ask. And it felt like quite a tick boxy exercise. I'm sure lots of people experience this and have experienced it over their time in education. But this is what I felt. So went sort of searching for some other ways of doing it and came across coaching. And took that to my school leaders and said, is that okay if I explore this a bit further? And they were like, yes, happy for you to do that. Great. So I went and got some training in coaching, and went to a company that offered this, and I learned how to ask questions and to listen and to explore what people wanted and what they needed, rather than telling them that they should do this and should do that. So it's kind of the opposite of the system that we had, kind of a more mentoring system. And I noticed when I brought this back into my appraisal systems that my sort of the people I was looking after had more ownership over what they were doing, and they were sort of deciding things for themselves and making their own decisions about how they were going to move things forward. And it had a real impact on, number one, the way they worked, number two, the way they felt about the way they were doing things. And they became way more reflective on what they were doing as well. It became less of a tick boxing exercise and more of an actual improvement of their practice. And I felt that was a really powerful thing. Because I loved it so much, I decided to leave education and become a coach. So I stopped my teaching about 6 years ago. And have now been a coach now for 6 of those years. I still teach. I'm a peripatetic teacher. So I teach trumpet and trombone and brass instruments, in schools in London. And I love that part of my job. But I have this coaching side as well, which is a real passion for me. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. And yeah, loving it.
That's amazing. So that you caught the bug, shall we say, whilst you're working in schools, and it had such a profound impact on your career and what you wanted to do. You went, well, I don't want to necessarily be teaching full time. I want to dedicate my energies and all my experiences to coaching and mentoring. So did you find when you transitioned from full-time teaching to setting up obviously your own practice in this case, did you find the transition quite easy, or were there some difficulties going from the safety net of a paycheck in the school to your own business?
I mean, there's definitely challenges. I think whenever you change from something that you've been doing for such a long time to a new world, if you like, a new business, there's always challenges. And I still come up against challenges with it, but I love what I do, and that's what keeps me doing what I'm doing. And I found different ways of getting the coaching done through my own practice, but also associate work, and it's working for me. And I really love the fact that I have that variety. It's not for everyone. I know that, but for me, it's good, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Towards the end, perhaps I can share with you my kind of passions and my advocacy for coaching and mentoring, because it's had such a big impact in terms of my career and my trajectory and everything that I was initially struggling with, and I have the benefit of a professional coming in and essentially helping me with that one. So yeah, it's really is dear to me. So in terms of coaching and mentoring, then, how would you define the two, and what could you say if in terms of definitions? Let's talk about maybe similarities and differences between coaching and mentoring. So how would you categorize the two?
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think the first thing to say is coaching, I think, is a process of working with a client or a colleague or whatever it is to identify areas that they want to improve for themselves and use their own knowledge and experience to sort of develop those ideas and to then set their own goals around it. So it's a real self-led conversation that you're having, and your coach is there to help with that identifying of what's in your head, essentially, and how you can then move that forward. Mentoring, I would say, is a process of where you're using someone who's had more experience than you in what they're doing, and sort of using their experiences to help you move forward. Now people will say that coaching is a more short-term goal-led idea, and mentoring is probably more over time. So it's a longer process. Because you can have a mentor that lasts, if it's your head teacher, for example, they might be there, for 2, 3, 4 years and mentoring you and sort of sharing their knowledge and their understanding of education, and that then helps you progress. Whereas coaching, I think, will give you a more goal set, a more set idea about what you want to change. So if it might be a mindset change, for example, around procrastination, or it might be about the idea of like self-belief in what you do, imposter syndrome or something like that, especially if you're moving up the career ladder. So there's the kind of set things that you're gonna really focus in on. So that's the two definitions of it, I would say. The similarities between the two, they both come from a listening point of view. I think you need to have the listening skills to make them work. And they both require psychological safety. If you don't feel safe and you're not coming with vulnerability to either of those conversations, then you're not going to make as much progress, and you may not even make any progress because of that, because of the idea that you're throwing your vulnerability in there, and if someone doesn't protect that vulnerability, then you're not going to trust them to do that. So I think in coaching and mentoring, there is an element of that. Yes.
Yeah, so carry on. I just, you were talking, I just had a couple of questions, but please carry on.
That's fine. And then I suppose the main difference for me is that coaching comes from a point of view of you not being an expert in what that person's doing. So I would not give advice in a coaching situation. I don't give people advice. I talk to them. I'll ask them questions about what it is they think about certain things, how they feel about certain things, what experiences they've had before that could lead them and help them to identify their way forward. But at no point do I give advice, because that's not my role. I can coach people outside of education as well as I can inside education, because I don't need to be the expert in the room. I'm just there partnering with that person. I might be their mirror, for example. They might say things and I'll say it back to them. Because when we say things, we don't always hear what we actually say. So by repeating the things that they're saying, they can hear themselves. And that gives them a real sense of ownership over the conversation and that partnership. In mentoring, because you're relying on the knowledge of someone else, there is an element of really sort of like asking them that question. So what is it you would do in this situation? The challenge for that with me is that it means that your ownership over that, over over what you do, has kind of slightly been relinquished in that conversation, because you're taking the experience of someone else, and that may not be the best thing for you, but you do it anyway because someone said, well, that's a good way of doing it. So although that can work, and I'm not saying mentoring is bad, but I think that there are times when it can be used well and when it's not used so well. The other in mentoring is the ego, in that quite often the person who's giving that information or being that, the ego can play quite a big part of that in mentoring. In coaching, the ego is not so, it is kind of taken away. You don't use your ego at all in coaching, because you're wanting people to come up with it for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. Just give me more questions to ask on that. That's some really insightful things you say there, Justyn. I want to go back to vulnerability when you mentioned that one. So it's a tricky one in school situations, and depending on the school environment you work in, the levels of vulnerability one shows can vary, for politics with a capital P or politics with a lowercase. So how could one be vulnerable when it comes to coaching and mentoring? How could they show that vulnerability, that they do need the help? without necessarily signposting to others around them that they are incapable or they're struggling. And I link also that to our ego as teachers, to say that, you know, I don't want to show anyone that I'm struggling because I want to appear that I'm in control. So how does one go around showing that vulnerability in order to get the help to be either coached or mentored?
Yeah, and that's such a good question, and it's such a tricky question to answer, because it really does depend on the trust you have in the people that you've got around you.
Yeah.
And when you find people that you do trust, if you're working in a school where you do trust the leaders around you, then it's how you then approach how do you approach them to say that you're finding something tricky or hard. We hate, as humans, we don't like to show that we aren't very good at something. It's a natural instinct to sort of protect ourselves, but actually to grow, and we're asking our kids in schools to do this all the time, is to ask for help and to say, actually, we don't know the answers to everything. And I would say, you know, if I was the head teacher in a school now, one of the biggest things I would be trying to work with my senior leadership team would be to help them to show some of their vulnerability when it comes to their teachers saying, we don't know all the answers all the time. So let's talk about that. What is it that we don't know? How can we learn from that? If we can get that happening in a school, then the trust starts to build, and the ability to feel like you can share your own vulnerabilities becomes higher. So if you can gain that from the idea of building that with your SOT, then I think that would be great. I didn't see the question there.
Oh no, it was just something someone posted. Jordan posted, if you don't trust the people that lead you, then would you not be in the wrong job / position, as a question. So that in itself, I think is thank you, Jordan, for that, by the way. You're quite right. If you can't trust the people that lead you to be vulnerable, then you'd need to question whether or not you're in the right situation. And what I mean by that is not necessarily bad mouthing or attributing blame to senior leaders, not at all. But the wrong position could just be personality. You know, it could be, it's not just a bad score. It could just be the wrong fit. So, but you raised a good point there, Jordan, about if you're in the wrong job position, then you're not trusting people. I mean, what would you say to that, Justyn? Do you reckon that's a fair point? Or
I think it's a very fair point. And you know, in those sorts of situations, I would suggest that a person finds somewhere else to find that trust in that and have that conversation around what they want to do to progress. And there are many outlets that you can do this from. It's not just your school that you can gain that thought from. We work in an amazingly networked system in education. You can find resources all over the internet with regards to how to support yourself and move forward in the way that we want to grow. So don't just restrict it to your school. In my sense, if that is where you are in that situation, don't completely trust the people that you're around. And I've been there. I know what that feels like. It's very difficult to relinquish that idea of safety if you don't trust in the people around you. But I would go and find other people to talk to that I do feel safe with and discuss that with, who are in education, who might understand it. And that might be a mentoring point, in that you might want to go and find somebody who's got experience in another place. And it might be that you start thinking about whether the school is right for you, because that is a question that I think we've all asked at times. Yeah,
thank you for that. Kind of somewhat related to that, in your opinion, what are the signs that a colleague would need coaching rather than mentoring, and vice versa? So if they come to you, what signs do you look for where you kind of they need to be coached or they need to be mentored? How do you kind of separate the two in that sense?
I think the trick here is to have a really good conversation with them where you are really hearing and listening to what their problems are or their challenges are. So, for example, if someone has come to me and they're saying to me, I don't know how to have that conversation with that parent because they're constantly on my back. They're emailing me all the time. They don't seem to be listening to what's happening with this child. I might do a mentoring situation there and just go, so I've been in that situation before. This is what I would do. Why don't you give it a go and then let me know how it goes, and then come back and see. So that's just a straightforward, quick fix, if you like, with that with a mentoring suggestion. If they're coming back and they say, I'm constantly having issues with parents and their conversations, and I don't seem to be able to challenge these parents with what they're saying to me, and it's not just one but several parents go back, I would probably use coaching in that because there's a pattern happening. So if there are patterns happening, often there's something, either a limiting belief or something that is happening where that person hasn't quite understood how they're dealing with a situation. Then that's where coaching becomes really, really powerful, because the questions you ask and the way that you get them to reflect on how they do it, they're going to see what they're doing as their challenge, rather than you telling them how to do something. When they're in that situation then, and they have had those conversations and they've had those reflections, they can then set themselves, like I always use the idea of, play a game with yourself, because I think the play is a really important way of viewing, like, taking on a new challenge. Because if you're playing with something, it don't have to take it quite so seriously. There's the idea of if you fail at something or you make a mistake in it, you can reflect on it and you can just change your rules slightly so that you can move it forward. So I use that a lot in my coaching. So if they can play with their idea and see and test a different way of approaching the way they have that conversation, they will then see if that works, and if that doesn't work, they can try another way of doing it. But the idea is that the conversation then becomes owned by you rather than someone telling you how to do it. So there are with that distinct idea of that conversation, of the challenging conversation, you've got two ways of dealing with it. I would say coaching for me would be the better way of dealing with it, because you've got ownership over it. But I know that mentoring can also work in that situation.
Yeah, I love that play, and almost that sense of play takes the sting out of the situation. Certainly, if you want to be coached or mentored, or in this case, mentored, to deal with something quite serious, and very stressful, the idea that you would see it as play, but like you said, play around with it, inject a little bit of humor in there. It sounds to me like it goes such a long way of taking the sting out of the situation. But I mean, as you know, when we're all in the state of play, we're in that heightened sense of focus, attention. We commit without any distractions around us. So when you eliminate a possibility of X, Y, and Z, and you just focus on play, I love that idea of just taking the sting out of it. It's amazing. Thank you for that. I'll certainly be adopting that when I'll be going through my running through things in my head like I normally do. So that's awesome. Moving on to scenario-based questions when it comes to how to use coaching and mentoring. Could you talk us through how people reach out to you for coaching and mentoring? Do they specifically ask, I'd like to be coached by yourself, mentored? How do you decide in terms of what's best for the people that reach out to you?
So there's several ways that I get clients, and that's, I do a lot of associate work. So that's someone going to a company and saying, I need some coaching, or we're running coaching, and I get assigned some clients, and that's great. I always have a conversation with that client. And generally, they know what they're getting at that point. They know that they're coming for coaching. Mentoring, I do less mentoring actually, but the mentoring that I do often through the music work I do actually, is where I go and do observations and things like that with Perry's. That mentoring is coming from is usually sort of assigned to me. in my coaching practice, obviously I have people that will come to me specifically and want to work on something specific that they're struggling with. And as I said before, that might be something like procrastination, for example, or imposter syndrome, or a limiting belief that they've got about themselves. Confidence, for example, might be something there. In that, I will have that conversation with them and see how open they are to that idea of coaching. It may be that the relationship between you and that person hasn't sparked, and then that's okay, because I think that is because coaching is such a partnership between those two people. You have to have trust in both ways on that. So I have turned people away and said to them, I don't think we're going to work very well together. So here's some suggestions of other people that you could go to and have a conversation and see if they would work better with you. That I would definitely do that. But it always comes from, I call it a chemistry call. I think it's important to have that idea that you both work well. The other way is actually that you might get work is when a company or a trust or something comes to you and says, I want you to work with my senior leadership team or with my middle leaders. And these are the things that we feel need to happen. And in that situation, I would often say, so with those people, I think coaching would work here, but I also think there's an element of mentoring, and I will take my hats off with both of those things. And I'll tell you which one I'm wearing in those situations, dependent on what you need and what you feel you need at that time. But that then is led by a third party, if you like. So someone else support you in to do that.
Jordan asked a really good question, and it's also got. I also asked another question in regards to what you said on that one. Jordan asked, "What's the most common area teachers need support in?" So, what's the most common things that people come to you and say, "I need help with X, Y, or Z"?
Yeah, thanks. A really good question. Overwhelm is one that often comes up, and I think in education we know how busy people are. They are really busy, but sometimes we need a moment to pause, to slow down, so that we're able to speed up and to choose the things that are the right things to do. We get thrown things constantly. I mean, I remember in my when I've been in classrooms that you're teaching one thing and someone comes in and asks you something, or you get emailed something else, and there's so many things going on in a day. It can be scary. The other thing that other things that come up are anxiety, especially on a Sunday. So that Monday morning, getting into work, people are so scared of opening their inboxes because they feel like they're going to be full. So it's how do you manage that? How do you manage that feeling when it comes to that Sunday, and working on how you can the things you can do to prepare yourself for your week and your day and those sorts of things. So they're quite often things. Imposter syndrome is big, especially when it comes to leadership teams. People feel that we know that in training, in going into leadership, often we don't get trained in how to become a leader until we start getting to places like deputy heads or assistant heads, deputy heads, head teachers, because we have courses in place for that. People tend not to go for it when they do middle leadership or things like that, but suddenly you're having to manage people, and that can be really challenging because you're so used to dealing with your day-to-day teaching and your school life, and you're still doing that, but then you're having to deal with teachers, and that's when middle leaders can feel that they need some upgrading of their skills in how to deal with adults. In situation, they're very good at dealing with children, but then they have to deal with adults, and that can sometimes cause people to feel really out of place and not quite knowing what they want to do. So quite a lot of my conversations will be around those sorts of skills and how to deal with conversations with people, especially difficult conversations with people.
Yeah, I forgot the question I was going to ask to you, and I think it will come as I'm talking to you. But I would like to touch upon that point of talking with adults. And so my question would be, if I'm going to be flippant about it, well, surely not you use all the tricks you would use to talk to your students and deal with students. Surely not you would use those for the staff you work with. Would that be right of me to say it, or is it completely out of whack?
No, I think you're absolutely. I think there's lots of truth about that, but we forget that as adults. We think that we've got to deal with people in a different way, and actually, there's lots of things that we, you know, when we have the coaching conversations, we'll be talking about. When have you been really successful in having a difficult conversation? And often teachers will pick up on conversations they've either had with their students, or they've had with parents. And many of the things that they do in those conversations to deal with students and parents apply to the same way that you would have a difficult conversation with a staff member. But we forget that that's what we do. Our brains are wonderfully weird things, aren't they? So we tend to ignore some of the advice we have for ourselves because we don't feel it fits that scenario. But actually, often they do. That it works the same way. So we have to try and unlock that in the way that we think. And that's where a coach comes in, because they're helping you to unlock that knowledge and that understanding. We have so much that we know about ourselves and our situations that we just don't use because we can't get it from our heads. So it's about how we get those things from there.
Yeah. Ah, well put then. I quite like that, because I only say that because I heard it somewhere. Someone basically go, well, you just talk to your colleagues like you would your children if they got a problem. It's like, are they right? Is that right? And it sounds completely wrong in the sense that it's just too flippant and just far too simplistic, but are they right? So it's great to hear from yourself in terms of that perspective. So appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. Before we carry on with the conversation, I just wanted to give another shout out for those who just joined us for Teacher Talk Radio, the Sunday lunch show with myself, Michael Wright. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Teachers Talk Connect show, which is back. It's an online, it's an annual CPD networking extravaganza. I like that. I always like the word extravaganza. For me, there's something just brilliant about that word. I like that. I think that's part of my dyslexia, is that because it's taken me forever to learn words, when there are words which I learn, I just think the way they sound. Anyway, I'm digressing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about coaching and mentoring, aren't we? It's happening on the Saturday, 14th of March in Manchester. Tickets are absolutely free. That's a Frank Zappa reference, if anybody got that one. So if you want to head over to ttrradio.org/Connect 2026. You can get your tickets there. Be really good to see you. And of course, we have our sponsor, Hatchet Learning, which this show is brought to you in partnership with. They are publishers of developmental books, professional books, resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Make sure you do level up your professional development today and visit hatchetlearning.com to explore a full range of titles. So I want to go into, Justyn, with you, good and bad examples. So we've spoken in depth about coaching, mentoring, the differences, how to approach the both, how to distinguish the both when you're talking to colleagues. So I think it's really good if we kind of delve into good and bad examples in that one. So let's start with positive one. Have you got any positive stories or positive anecdotes about coaching and mentoring where it's really made a difference to someone?
Well, I mean, I'm very fortunate in that I've worked with a lot of people now, and you know, I've seen some amazing examples of coaching, and not just from me, but from colleagues who have coached as well. And I think one of the really good ones for me was when I was working with a senior leader who was really struggling to manage their time around their role. They felt like people were just constantly interrupting them, and they couldn't do their job because they were being pulled on in so many different directions. They weren't particularly a forceful person, so they weren't forthright. They weren't weren't loud in the way that they presented themselves. They were quite insular in that, but they were really good at their job. We worked on, in our coaching sessions, we worked on building confidence to stand up for themselves and to actually say, this is what I can do. This is what I'm good at. You need to give me the space and time to do these jobs. They were very much a yes person. I'm sure we've all felt that as well. And through the coaching, this person built their confidence to be able to say to their head in a meeting, they said, actually, I need to say no to this because, and they gave their reasons why, and they'd come up with all of this themselves. They built their confidence to be able to say no, and it absolutely transformed their job and the way they did things. And through that, and I've worked with this person for a couple of years, they've gone on to become a head because they felt that they had the confidence to be able to do that, and they never would have done. They didn't dream of becoming a head at that point. They were a deputy. They didn't want to do anymore. They were like, this is where I'm at. I feel like I don't want to be the face of it. But they gained the confidence enough to actually put themselves in that position and go, do you know what? I can do this and I can become a head. And that was amazing. And that's a really, really, really good example of how powerful coaching can be for a person. I'm sure you've probably seen, have you got any good examples?
Oh gosh, in terms of my one, I do in terms of the Perry stuff that I've run. I remember coming in to a position once and inheriting a team of somewhat disenfranchised peripatetic teachers. And essentially the wind had kind of gone out of their sails and they were left drifting and they weren't managed or coached in any capacity for various reasons, nothing to do with the person who I replaced. So for my role in terms of music, and I don't know if there's any other subjects that have a similarity, maybe sports have a similarity. The coaches, the Perrys that work within a department are the absolute lifeblood of anything we do. And it's the same with the TAs. The people, and there's lots of stuff that I've read about TAs being the heartbeat and the lifeblood of the lessons, and I absolutely agree with that. You know, TAs, Perrys, the people that do quote unquote the unseen work are really the people that keep any department going. And I was working with one particular singing teacher who was on the verge of quitting and just saying, do you know what, I've had enough of everything that I've experienced here, and I just don't really think it's working out. And I know, I recognize their talent and their ability straight away. And in my mind is that no, you can't leave. You can't leave. You know, you're far too good in what you do in this department to throw in the towel. So in terms of my approach, I took on more of a mentoring side because I can't coach a singing teacher because, you know, I'm a wannabe bassist / baritone. So if I go to a proper singing teacher and start coaching them, they're going to be laughing me out the building. I'm an instrumentalist, not a vocalist, as I always say. So I wanted to go from a position of mentoring, and essentially what I did was almost not discuss anything to do with the job as such, but just really get to know the person and really get to know them as people and really what drives them as singers and their passions. And I did so with having lessons. So I've been wanting to have singing lessons, but I thought now's a great time for me to go to a staff member and say, do you know what? Painting it as, you know what, I've always wanted singing lessons, and I've never really had felt like I've met the right person to have these. And do you mind if you teach me or anything? And they was a little bit taken back. It's like, well, you're the head of the department, and aren't you meant to be? It's like, no, I want to learn from someone great. And I even suggested that my wife also has singing lessons from her because, you know, she truly is amazing. And then from those sessions, I've noticed that her confidence just grew a little bit. And, you know, she even said it's harder to teach someone who knows a lot about the music that they're learning, because almost like she's felt like, oh, you know a lot about this, X, Y, and Z. But I assured her that's not the point. I know how to play the music, but I don't know how to sing it. So to cut a long story short, she didn't leave. She ended up staying right up until I believe it was last year when she moved on to another position. But that kind of quiet support, and it's not necessarily I'm going to help you now, that kind of that almost a endorsement, if you will, with that support of mentoring really made a difference. And I'm really happy for the department because we retained an amazing singing teacher who had gone on to teach many students and did well in exams. And one of the students now who she was coaching is now doing West End auditions and is, basically earmarking a career to be a singer in the West End. So those kind of things I'm really proud of. More to the point, just so that we can keep someone good and let them continue to do the great work that they've done. Otherwise, if I would have just gone, oh well, that's too bad, isn't it? And or worse, the effect, then A, would have lost an amazing singing teacher, and B, ethically as well, I could have been in a position to help someone and I didn't, and I wouldn't want that. I would want to, in whatever power I have or whatever you want to call it, I wanted to have something where I could truly help someone. So it was a good feeling, and yeah, I reiterate, she was absolutely amazing, and both myself and my wife absolutely adore her, and she's just such a brilliant person and a brilliant teacher. So
yeah, brilliant. And I think that shows a real empathy towards that teacher and giving them support that was really needed for them. And there's one thing you said there that really sticks in my head around the language of coaching and mentoring, which I think is a really important distinction to make. We see lots of people see coaching as I say, like a sports coach or like a musician coach, someone who's a teacher who's imparting their knowledge and gaining those the David Brailsford quick
marginal gains,
marginal gains sort of thing, and that sort of idea of coaching. And actually that's, for me, that coaching term is like the opposite of what I do. So because that is you still using your expertise and your knowledge to gain an advantage or to help someone, support someone move forward. And in sports coaching, that is absolutely what they call it. They call it coaching, but actually it's sports mentoring, because they are the expert in it, and they're giving advice or trying to find the nuances that help that move forward. Whereas coaching for me it's a real sort of like, it's a selfless thing. I'm not the person trying to find that answer. You turned it around on its head actually in the way that you dealt with that person, because you took yourself out of the expert role and you said, so you teach me, you tell me what to do, which is more coaching, which is absolutely more coaching. You weren't mentoring there. You were coaching them.
I see.
Because they were showing what they knew and their understanding of it and their knowledge, and they then learned from that. So the fact that she said, this is really challenging actually, teaching someone who knows how to do a lot of the things that I would normally be teaching people to do. That is then a coaching situation, because they're thinking through what their practice is and how they're going to do it, and making things, changing the way that they teach to allow themselves to be better at what they do. And because they got better at doing it for you, it then influenced the rest of their practice. So they then gained more confidence and probably became a better teacher overall for it. So I think that was a coaching moment rather than a mentoring moment.
I appreciate it. Makes a whole lot of sense when you explain about that. Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for that. And that's and even hearing it back from you, because I didn't go into it with a definitive plan of I'm going to do this because of this. I just went in to go, I want to show support in the most non-obtrusive way, but also in quite a naturalistic way, because at that time I didn't feel that confident of being that role of boss, shall we say. I wanted to almost go into a level of, right, I'm a complete novice in this environment, so I recognize that you're an amazing teacher, so if I could get some help from you, and then that in turn, as you mentioned, it was great. Thank you, Justyn, for that. Moving rather more negatively onto bad examples. Do you have any bad examples that you're willing to share about coaching and mentoring practice from what you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that coaches make mistakes too. I still make mistakes, and you know, it's a lot of it is down to when I've been in the situation, because I work with a lot of teachers, and you know, I've worked in senior leadership, so I understand the stress and strains that come from that. And I move from coaching into mentoring role when the person's looking for coaching. So I have to be quite distinct in those two things. A coaching role, you contract with the person to let them know exactly what you're going to do in that role. But occasionally, you know, my ego gets the better of me, or my knowledge gets the better of me, and my questions that I want to ask are already in my head before I've even listened to what that person said. You know, I'll drop into an advice mode rather than really hearing what they say, and allowing them the time to think of their own answer. It just happens, and I have to catch myself when I'm in that moment. So bad examples of that would be where I've given someone some advice without really meaning to. They've gone and used that to do something, and it's not worked. And they've come back and said, "Well, you told me this is correct," and I've gone, "I did, didn't I? And I'm really sorry about that. That's not what I should have done." What it does is it means that person isn't in control, or not in control. Sorry, that's the wrong word. They're not responsible for their action in that sense, because you've given them the advice and what they should do. And if that doesn't work, they've got someone to blame. Essentially, that's why it's happened. So you're taking away their accountability. Coaching, it's all about your accountability. It's your choices. So it's not mine. It's your responsibility. And by doing that, they will reflect on that and take their ownership over what they decide to do. So when I've been in that situation where I've given the advice, especially when I've been in a coaching role, I feel quite guilty over that actually after sessions, and I reflect on that, and occasionally I've apologized for giving advice in coaching sessions the next time I've seen them, and I've gone, "I'm really sorry, but I wasn't the best coach for you at that point, and I'm really sorry. This is what I want to do from now on," and recontract with that person to let them know that that's where the safety is, and that is.
I'll reframe it back to you and say that even though you say that was negative, I absolutely see that experience as a positive, based upon your humility and your ability to go, "My bad, I'm really sorry. Moving forward, this is what I'm going to do." And I'll point to one specific example of I consider to be bad mentoring when I joined one position, and I really struggled with this disparity between my expectations, my values, my ethics with the school that I was working at, and it became very quickly early on that we weren't meeting, and it wasn't something that they decided; it's something that I decided that this isn't working. You know, this is not going to work. And I was talking with a particular person about this, and I introduced the idea and said, I'm really struggling with the role. It's nothing to do with the ability of doing the job. I can do the job, but I'm really struggling with connecting with the role, and I'm finding it very hard to justify me doing something, because I know deep down in my heart, I can just see that there are things that aren't working, you know. Now, I would say a good mentor in this way would go straight away, "Understood, I hear you, you know, that you must be going through some really, really bad times with this one. Let's work together." And I'm going to assume the person of being the responsible one in terms of guiding here. Let's work together. Let's see if we can find that bit in the middle so that number one, you feel in control of the role, and then number two, you're really able to operate at your best. Because I'm someone that I suffer tremendously with imposter syndrome. Being neurodiverse, it's just something that I've always had massive issues with. So for me, I need to feel, you need to touch, to feel, to sense that a sense of control and success. And then I'm like, okay, then I'm like, I'm just away. Like I've got the ball, I'm just going to run to the touchline, you know. I was hoping for that, but what I got was rather vague assurances and half-baked kind of ideas, which didn't really, in my mind, it didn't really all add up. And then it came to one particular session where, again, I just said, look, it's X, Y, Z is happening. And, you know, I was really, really struggling at that time. And it must have been something that they thought had worked before. And then they offered this scenario. They said, well, why don't we do this? Why I want you to do this for me? I want you to write down your dream scenario. I want you to write down, if you had all the resources and all the money and all the time in the world and everything, what would you like to see happen? What would you like to do? And I remember going away thinking to myself, such a ridiculous proposition to ask of what my dream one would be, because I know fully that ain't going to happen in this situation. I can't go in and say I want this, this, and this, because it's not going to happen. So why am I going in and why am I doing this? It makes no difference to me whether I tell you my scenario or not. And a couple of weeks down the line, I expressed this and I said, I just don't think this is working. I really don't appreciate this advice is having any impact. And it was, and what I needed to hear was that from you, Justyn, that I'm really sorry. Yeah, you know what? That probably was the wrong thing. Let's scrub that. Can we start again? Let's go back right from the beginning of the basics. Let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear what you really are struggling with, and let me see how I can help you with that. And then moving forward, what I've learned this for myself. Moving forward, I'll do X, Y, and Z. You know, even the question of how do you think I can help you moving forward? We never really had that discussion, and it's just it's very, you know, it is very regrettable that that took place, and it almost kind of I'm thinking of that experience as something that is quite negative, and I do go in with a sympathetic view of the other person, of course, but I also look at it from a perspective of, if I'm in a position where I'm the mentor or I'm the person in that aspect, I'm going to do my best to try and get to the essence of who the person is, what they're going through. And rather than just offering something that I think works, oh, I've tried this before, I'm going to do my very best to find something which I can guarantee has an impact or have a positive impact, whilst at the same time checking in. Is that all right? How are you getting on with this? How are you feeling with that? You know, I think that's an important factor for me. So, but
yeah, and you, that's really interesting, because there are lots of things you said there. I mean, there's questions that I would use when I'm in that, if I'm in a mentoring situation, where I can use like coaching questions, even though I'm mentoring, I can use coaching style questions. And you said one there. It's like, what was your experience of, what was your experience that you're in there? Tell me more about that. Tell me more about the, what you're seeing. What would success look like for you, going forward? Rather than saying what I think success is like, I would ask them what they think success is like, because actually it's important that they know, they can see what is good and what is, what would be better. And how can I help you to improve that? How can I help you to get that goal, to move that forward? And as a mentor, that's what I would want to hear. I would want to know, or a mentee, sorry, I would want to know those things. I would want to get that information back from someone. So I think it's important to use those questions. And one of the things we talk about in coaching is that contracting. And if you can contract properly in coaching, the conversation becomes really, really straightforward and easy, because you know what the topic's about, what their goal is, what they want to achieve by having that conversation. and as long as you're very clear and specific about it, then the conversation becomes really easy, because all we were doing is listening to them and then just trying to like elicit other meanings and then get them to a point where they can make a decision about what they want to do next. In mentoring, it's a slightly different, because they're often looking for your feedback. And I would say that you can still use coaching questions to support them with that. And I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, spot on. We've got the last 5 minutes, and I want to offer this. We were talking about this off air, that I learned from a particular course that I went on that Justyn and I kind of quite resonated with. It's not from me, it's from the deputy head who was leading this session, and I thought it was such a wonderful thing, and I think it links to coaching and mentoring. He said, words to the effect of, people like being led, they don't mind being led, but they don't like being managed. We were talking about how in some instances, from our experiences, people often get it the other way around. People tend to manage people and lead, the situation, so to speak. So Justyn, your thoughts on that one? People like to be led, but they don't like to be managed.
People like to know what they need to do to move forward. So if you're clear about what it is, the vision of the, if we're talking about schools, the vision of the school, what is it that they need to do to be successful in what they do? They don't need someone telling them how to do that specifically, because we all do things differently. And your experience of how to manage that situation will be different to how your colleague is going to experience that. So the leadership isn't just about telling people how to do something. It's about giving them that vision and that knowledge of what it is what you would like them, what the success will be at the end of it, and then allowing them to choose how they get there. That for me is like that would be the most successful way of getting your team to work well.
Yeah, brilliant. And one more question, if I may. What structures do you think schools need to put in place for effective coaching and mentoring? And maybe I change the word effective to perhaps realistic, in terms of time management, in terms of workload, in terms of headspace, stress. So what do you reckon are the most, not effective, but the best ways you reckon schools can implement mentoring and coaching to support one another?
Number one, get training, from like proper training for people in coaching, because it's an unregulated profession, coaching. So anyone can turn around and say they're a coach. So I would say, if you want really good quality coaching in your school, get someone trained as a coach, so they really know what they're doing, or as a mentor as well. There's plenty of training courses out there for that as well. And then give them the time to do that coaching with people. You can be specific about who's going to benefit from it most, but you can always introduce great coaching questions that staff can have for themselves, and just to help them do the basics. But if you want to really improve a school, then you're going to need to invest in that time for it. And I know that coaching does take time, but you gain back more in time than you lose by having great coaching, because people speed up, they're more clear about what their outcomes are for what they want to do. It's a win-win in my view. Absolute win-win.
Yeah, I like I said, I couldn't agree more. And going back to what I mentioned about my personal connection with coaching and mentoring, I've because of, I would say, working with a mentor about, I don't know, gosh, what was it, 2026, about 5 or 6 years ago, working with a mentor helped me, inspired me to undertake a master's. And again, similar to your work with the now head teacher, I didn't think I had it in me to go and do an academic qualification. As I mentioned, my dyslexia, I also have ADHD and various other things. I thought there is no way I could handle it. But because of her skillful mentoring, I was able to confidently apply and come up with my own remit of research have the confidence to do that. And then, I stand before you, many years, graduated with a master's degree, but also now looking to, I don't know how silly I am, but also going to a PhD and wanting to explore that. So that's the power of mentoring and coaching. It's that instilling a belief in somebody that they can do it, whether you guide them or whether or not you coach them, or whatever the terminology is. It has an impact. It really does. And I agree with you, Justyn. I think more can be done. And if you invest this time now, it will pay dividends later on throughout the careers of teachers, and also the benefit the students as well. Justyn, thank you ever so much. It's been absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us for TTR. And thank you to everyone who have been listening to this wonderful chat. Of course, this is available for download on Podbean, and I'll put it on my socials as well. So I know there's a couple of people who had a few issues on LinkedIn in terms of viewing it. So this will be presented later on. So if you want to catch up with this, you're more than welcome at a later date. And all I just wanted to say for everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll see you in the next couple of weeks with another show. And once again, Justyn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you.
No problem, everyone. And have a lovely rest of the Sunday. I don't know what it's like where you live, Justyn, but the sun has just come out, and it's a rarity because I haven't seen it for nigh on 3 weeks where I am. So it's just shown itself. So hopefully wherever you are, you can enjoy the rest of your Sunday with some good weather. Okay, everyone, take care, and I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused